So really good to have you here, and great to have an opportunity to talk about your role with the City of Oshawa. As you know, we're really looking at the topic being what elected officials need from public sector employees, especially communication staff. So you serve Ward 4, City of Oshawa. The city has a little over, I think, 150,000 people. And communications, obviously a big part of your job as a councillor. Maybe you could just tell us how many people you serve in Ward 4 and how important it is for you to stay connected with those people.
Yeah, for sure. So the ward that I represent is about ballpark about 30,000 households, and you know, communications, how politicians communicate with constituents, it's still changing, I guess. You know, I think the conversation in 10 years from now will look different, and certainly looks different now than it did 10 years ago and 20 years ago, and I think that'll keep happening. A lot more politicians now who communicate using their own social media channels, but the city as a corporation, as a corporate entity, does have its own communications department, and that department does split some of their time between sort of general communications work, and then also occasionally pulling particular members of council in to particular communications that have to go out, and so that's then when, you know, a bit of a different situation at that point. That's you know, I can sort of run. I can, as a municipal councillor, I can sort of run rogue, if you will, when I'm doing my, you know, if I'm using Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or whatever. Most municipalities, until you get into much larger cities where you have, let's say, a municipal councillor that has a small staff in their office, maybe in a constituency office, that's a little bit of a different situation. But maybe for your more, let's call them your middle-sized cities, sometimes there's a mix of functions provided by the the different city staff that support you in other functions as well too. But there is a dedicated communications team, though, in our case, for things like press releases and communication.
Right. Are there key people in the communications branch? I think it's a corporate communications office that you have some contact with. Do they do some research for you, providing any information to you that's pertinent to your job?
So the main points where I have contact points with communication staff is in things like city press releases. So let's say there's a release for an upcoming initiative or project or event that's now been approved by council, and so in the case of the City of Oshawa, of course, every municipality is going to have nuances and differences, but let's say something is very particular to my ward. So let's say it's a major park redevelopment, for instance, or a community input phase of a project, and it very much is geographically based. Typically what happens is that the corporate communications department, they will reach out to that particular or those particular city councillors, and they'll be looking for a quote to include in the media release. And then at that point we have one of two options. So it depends on three options, I guess. So one of them is that, you know, you can email back, and usually they've got to bug me 2 or 3 times to remind me that they need to get one of those press releases out after asking me the first time. So that's one way. You write up a quote that you want to sort of represent your thoughts and your words to the community on that particular item. Another one is that, let's say things are really busy and you want to have a quote in there and you don't have time to scramble something together. You can say, hey, can someone throw something together for me to approve? And then you sign off on that. And then, of course, the other option is that you can always decline for whatever reason. If you decide you don't want to quote on that one, you certainly can do that. So ward-based is a big one. The other one is for those types of quotes. The other one is if, let's say, you're the chair or the vice chair of a particular standing committee of council. So it's now more of a departmental thing. So in my case, I'm vice chair of community services. So let's say that there's a major new recreational program that's being rolled out, and they want to get community feedback before they kind of reach the finish line and it start to launch. We reach the launch date for it. So, but it's something that's kind of a citywide thing. It's not particular to my ward, but as Vice Chair of Community Services, because that's in that department, they would reach out to me, same thing for a quote on that one. And with those particular quotes, the interesting thing about that is that it's a little less political. So you're not really, you have to save the political tone for those, like I say, your kind of personal social media platforms, or if the newspaper phones you up or something on a controversial issue. So the corporate communications team, they don't manage councillors in that regard, which is a way that we differ from higher levels of government, provincial and federal, where they're sort of expected in a way to be partisan and maybe sort of align in particular ways on issues, and their team even supports them in those types of communication. So a bit of a different animal there, and some differences in approach for sure.
Mm-hmm. So I know that community engagement opportunities are one of the areas that the corporate communications office is involved in. I know you're very much a community-oriented person. How does this work help you to do your job more effectively?
Yeah, I think that connecting with the community is again, we're sort of re-entering a new learning phase in how we connect with the community. Mm-hmm. How that was done in what I'll call the civic sphere. So by that I mean, community at large, politics, the media, just that overall community dialogue has been going through so much change in the last few years. Mm-hmm. And I think that part of both the challenge, but maybe the exciting thing about a time like right now is that for those who want to innovate, for those who want to try out new communications and connection approaches, it's a great time to do that, because there's been so much. I'm not big on buzzwords, but I think it's a fair time to use it. There's been so much disruption in as we see a lot of change in the sort of mainstream media, conventional media, local media. And so now is a ripe opportunity and time to think about how we can use communications policies and approaches and opportunities to connect with both that sort of civic dialogue, but also the municipal infrastructure, the political representatives, and how we can energize some of that. So that the corporate, in our case, City of Oshawa, the corporate communications department plays a really big role in sort of being that catalyst and starting moment in creating those linkages to be able to communicate and hear from the public.
Right. Now, and I think about things like stakeholder relations and public consultation and things like that. Is that the information that they gather, or they set up town halls, things like that, that's useful for you as a councillor?
Yeah, I think so, just because there's just so much, not only there's so much information out there are so many voices vying to be heard as well. And how do you figure out which ones you need to kind of get in that forefront where you can make sure that they're being heard? How do you define that? And having the support to figure out which voices might also be missing from the picture too, that's really big, because some people, your everyday citizen in particular, they're not professional, they're not professionals at lobbying or getting attention. So I think it's important to support their ability to get the ear of the municipal system, the politicians, those who are in sort of administrative charge of things. So I think that's super important.
Yeah. Now, are there particular projects that you might be working on now, currently, where they exemplify the good working relationship that you have with the corporate communications folks?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they just sent out, so this summer there is a feedback process for a significant park redevelopment here in my ward, Rotary Park, that's been there for many, many years, and sort of been a bit of a tough nut to crack in terms of how do we take that forward with an old pool that has suffered deterioration over the years, and do we want to rebuild a new one? Do we want to change the park? That sort of thing. So there's a public input process on that, but the first point of contact on that was corporate communications role in just getting that word out to the community that this input phase is now open and that we want you to participate in this input phase and get your voice into this, because it's a really important one, just not only because it's in my ward, but it's also a part of the city where there is so in terms of the socioeconomic distribution of this part of the city where the park is located, it's it's a lot more families that might be lower income. They probably don't have big pools in the backyard. Other forms of recreation close by. It's super important to these communities. So that first point, that communications process, will be the thing that leads to the quality, I guess, and the volume of the answers and the feedback that we get.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Are there any other things that you think of where it says, hey, you know what, we really are working well together? A lot of challenges out there. I know you mentioned that there's a lot of information flow coming across your desk, your social media platforms. Anything that says to you, hey, we're really working well together. Things are working out.
Yeah, I think that some of the things that we've done well in the last couple of years is really build out the social media presence for the city, and that's that's part of the communications portfolio. Mm-hmm. So it's been good to see them strengthening and continue to strengthen that, because it's I don't think it's enough to simply say, well, here's sort of the conventional way that it has always been done. You run ads in newspapers and you send press releases out. Those parts are important, but really looking at what are people actually using, how are people actually engaging in this day and age, and I've been appreciative of the work that they've been doing to grow that piece of the portfolio for sure. Mm-hmm. I think that there's always going to be posts that have low engagement in social media. Not everyone is interested in commenting on a purchasing bylaw. Let's say it's not all of them are as exciting as others, but when you get into the stuff that really matters, kind of front and center of the communities, and you see that high level of engagement, you think, okay, this is good, this is informative. What else can we do with this to make it even more successful?
Yeah. Well, I look at things like the Ed Broadbent Waterfront Park concept, and obviously very important that public consultation plays a role in that. Projects like that obviously important, and obviously communications has a role to play. That helps you in your job as a politician.
Yeah, and that's a great example too of one that is going to be a fairly sort of significant success, I'd like to think, of this council term, in getting that park underway, down at our waterfront, and and even just the piece of, so there's getting that consultation in, but even the piece around getting people excited about it. I think that's important too, that people see that, hey, things are going on, things are happening. Mm-hmm. Because one of the common complaints that we hear is, I never heard about that. I didn't hear about this. And, I want to see people excited about the good things that are happening in their municipality, and certainly be able to have open and honest, conversation, again, civic conversation about the things that aren't good. I'm not looking to shut that out too. That's very important as well. But I think that we need to also be able to celebrate the successes that we're building and get people excited about it, because it also helps. It's a bit of a virtuous cycle, if you will. If people know about the possibilities, it gets them further engaged just generally, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's great. I don't have any other questions, but I do thank you for the time. Really appreciate it.
Well, yeah, nice touching base with you, John.
Thank you.